When examining the history of engineering enterprise during the Victorian era, no department will give records of greater interest than that dealing with applications of hydraulic power, the operation of machinery and mechanisms using water under high pressure delivered through pipeline networks. In England, during the second half of the 19th century, such systems were utilized across all spheres of industrial and municipal activity. Pressurized water was applied to drive machine tools in factories and plants, bridge spans and dock gates, quayside cranes, passenger elevators in hotels and banks, as well as curtains and revolving stages in theaters. Pipelines were laid throughout the urban and industrial infrastructure, across factory grounds, along quaysides, in warehouses, in workshops, and beneath bustling city streets. In London alone, approximately 180 miles of these hydraulic mains were laid. The establishment of such energy networks stands as a remarkable result of the work of engineering pioneers who transformed ordinary water into an agent for transmitting mechanical power over distance. The use of water under high pressure, owing to its physical properties, low compressibility and fluidity, is in some respects the most simple, safe, and effective agent for transmitting power. It has not the capacity to produce the brilliant effects that are so readily obtained from electric power transmission, but as a steady, faithful, and reliable servant, it outranks any other agent. During the Victorian era, water under high pressure possessed latent possibilities that engineers had yet to develop. However, a growing comprehension of hydraulic principles gradually led to its more extended application wherever great power under absolute control was required. In those same years, the concept of transmitting hydraulic energy over distance by means of pipe networks was conceived and put into practice. The first practical application of water for the transmission of force was achieved by the prominent English inventor and mechanic Joseph Bramah. In 1796, he invented the hydraulic press, which utilized this principle. Bramah was also the first to advance the concept of transmitting energy over a distance using water under pressure through pipelines. In his patent of 1812, he proposed the creation of a municipal network of underground hydraulic mains to supply workshops, though the practical realization of this idea was not achieved at that time. The genuine momentum behind this field came from William Armstrong, an English engineer, scientist, and industrialist. Alongside Bramah, he is widely recognized as one of the two founding figures of hydraulic engineering. Although he ultimately led the largest mechanical works in Britain, and arguably the world, Lord Armstrong did not begin his professional life as an engineer, nor did he possess the conventional technical education deemed essential for success at the time. Complying with his father's wishes, he initially trained in law and practiced as a solicitor for several years. However, legal intricacies held less appeal for him than natural science, which he pursued during his leisure hours. During travels through the Yorkshire hills, observing a water wheel inspired him to design schemes for harnessing the energy of mountain streams, revealing his true engineering aptitude. In an 1840 letter to the Mechanics magazine, he outlined his concepts regarding water as an effective medium for storing and transmitting power. He showed that if water were pumped by a steam engine into an elevated reservoir, a large portion of the potential energy thus given to the water could be obtained from it again, and further, that a small steam engine in this scheme, working continuously, might supply many machines working intermittently. However, at that time, there were virtually no mechanisms suited for working with high-pressure water, if any existed at all, so Armstrong's first invention was a water wheel capable of efficiently utilizing water under pressure. Later, realizing that hydraulic power is best suited to provide the smooth and powerful motion required in hoisting devices, he created the hydraulic crane. Although this mechanism underwent many changes over time, it became the foundation for a wide variety of models by other inventors and found application in a multitude of different settings. This diagram shows a sketch view and plan of Lord Armstrong's first crane, which was designed to lift loads of 1 ton. The hydraulic equipment of the crane was mounted entirely beneath the platform decking, with only the valve control levers protruding above the surface. The jib could swing through a certain angle in both directions around the central post of the crane. The rotation of the jib was accomplished by means of a sheave secured to its base and a turning chain wrapped around it, which was connected to the plungers of 2 hydraulic cylinders specifically intended for this operation. When one plunger was extended by water pressure, the other retracted at the same time, and the chain turned the jib. The cylinders were connected through control valves to the pressure main and the discharge pipe. The hoisting of the hook was performed by a separate hydraulic cylinder, to the plunger of which the lifting chain was connected. However, the chain did not run directly from the hook to the plunger, but was passed through a system of pulleys forming 6 folds or branches. Thus, a multiplier with a 6-to-1 ratio was obtained. This is the so-called indirect action system, the purpose of such a solution being to increase the speed and length of travel of the lifting chain. This worked as follows. When the plunger moved by just 1 foot, the chain, passing through a system of pulleys with a 6-to-1 ratio, received a travel of 6 feet. The speed of its movement, and consequently the hoisting speed of the load, increased by exactly 6 times. However, not everything was so advantageous, as the golden rule of mechanics came into play. By gaining in distance and speed, we inevitably lose in force. The use of the indirect system made it possible to increase the speed of the load by 6 times, but the maximum weight of the lifted load decreased by the same factor. If the force on the plunger itself was 63 kilonewtons, about 6.4 tons, at a system pressure of about 50 bars and a cylinder diameter of 5 inches, it dropped to 10.5 kilonewtons, about 1.07 tons, at the hook. But nothing could be done about it. One had to accept it and seek a balance. Some historians of technology present Armstrong's first crane with a slightly different design. In it, the slewing of the jib was carried out by a double-acting hydraulic cylinder, the plunger of which was connected to a rack and pinion mechanism with a gear on the base of the crane post. Also, this crane had 3 lifting cylinders working with a single crosshead attached to the lifting chain. Depending on the required force, 1, 2, or all cylinders could be engaged, regulating the mechanism's power and water consumption. But this is most likely one of Armstrong's subsequent, more powerful models, as the first model did not require power adjustment. In 1846, Armstrong proposed to the Newcastle Water Company to use the excess water pressure in the lower part of the city to drive this crane and apply it for port needs. He claimed that the hydraulic crane could unload ships faster and cheaper than conventional cranes. Despite the low pressure in the system, the experiment proved so successful that 3 more such cranes were immediately ordered. The success of the machine's first application prompted Armstrong to consider establishing a business for the manufacture of cranes and other hydraulic equipment. He finally abandoned his legal practice and in 1847 organized the firm W.G. Armstrong & Company at Elswick, near Newcastle, where he built a factory. Armstrong received orders for hydraulic cranes from the Edinburgh and Northern Railways and from the Liverpool docks. He also built hydraulic equipment for the dock gates at Grimsby. The company expanded. In 1850, 45 cranes were produced, and 2 years later, 75. During the remainder of the century, Armstrong's company produced an average of 100 cranes a year. The Elswick Works built dock cranes with a lifting capacity of up to 40 and even 160 tons. In the next part of this series, we will continue our story about Lord Armstrong and his work, as well as other hydraulic equipment and the hydraulic power networks that supplied them.